The US government is planning to ban all vintage cars by 2025. Sounds crazy, right? But it's real, and it's coming fast. Classic cars, those cherished symbols of American freedom, could be outlawed in just a few years. Why now? Is it really about the environment, or is something else at play? Could this ban kill the classic car industry? Stick around, because what you're about to hear will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. What's happening? The US government just proposed banning vintage cars by 2025. Could this really happen? In a move that has stunned car enthusiasts and collectors across the nation, the US government recently proposed a shocking plan to ban vintage cars from public roads by 2025. Yes, you heard that right. Your beloved classics, the ones that you cherish, restore, and drive on weekends, could be outlawed in just a few years. This announcement, if passed, would mark a drastic shift in the landscape of American car culture. For decades, classic cars have been a symbol of freedom, nostalgia, and history. They represent an era when cars were built with soul and character, an era that many Americans hold dear. So why would the government target these iconic vehicles now? The proposal has ignited a firestorm of outrage from car enthusiasts and collectors, raising questions about the future of the automotive industry, individual freedoms, and the preservation of American history. This proposal doesn't just affect the car community, it affects all of us. The decision to ban these vehicles could have far-reaching consequences on our culture, economy, and even personal freedoms. So what's the real motivation behind this controversial decision, and what does it mean for the future of vintage cars in the United States? This isn't just about cars, it's about who we are as a society. But why now? Why is the government suddenly targeting classic cars? Let's take a closer look at the timing behind this shocking proposal. Why now? The timing behind the controversy. Why is the government targeting classic cars now? It's no coincidence. The question everyone is asking is, why has the government chosen this moment to propose such a drastic measure? Classic cars have been on the roads for decades, so why the urgency now? Well, the timing is far from accidental. The push for the ban on vintage cars aligns with several larger political and environmental trends that have been brewing for years. One of the driving forces behind the proposal is the increasing pressure to meet aggressive climate goals. In recent years, states like California have led the charge toward a zero-emissions future, instituting strict regulations on vehicles that don't meet their air quality standards. California's Air Resources Board in particular has been pushing to phase out gas-powered vehicles in urban areas by 2035, and the federal government has been taking cues from these efforts. So what does that mean for classic cars? Many of them were built before the strict emissions regulations that we take for granted today. Vintage cars were designed in a time when environmental concerns weren't nearly as high on the national agenda. These older models often lacked the sophisticated technology found in modern vehicles to limit emissions and improve fuel efficiency. In fact, the engines in many classic cars spew far more carbon dioxide and pollutants than their modern counterparts. However, there's a deeper layer to this. The reality is that the classic car community isn't the biggest contributor to the nation's environmental challenges. While classic cars certainly produce more pollution than modern vehicles, they represent only a small fraction of all vehicles on the road. Many critics argue that the focus on vintage cars is misplaced. There are far bigger offenders contributing to pollution, such as private jets, cruise ships, and industrial operations. The question many are asking is, why target classic cars when the bigger culprits go largely unchecked? But is this really about the environment, or is there more at play? Let's dig into the environmental justification for this ban and see if the numbers truly support it. Could the government be using classic cars as an easy scapegoat in the fight against pollution? The numbers behind the ban. Do classic cars really contribute to climate change, or are they just an easy scapegoat? The government's environmental case for banning vintage cars rests largely on the emissions these vehicles produce. While it's true that many classic cars have engines that burn far more fuel than modern vehicles, it's important to put things into perspective. According to environmental advocates, vintage cars account for a disproportionately high level of pollution compared to their numbers on the road. However, when we break down the actual numbers, the argument starts to look less convincing. It's estimated that classic cars make up less than 1% of all vehicles on US roads. Considering that there are approximately 270 million cars in the US, the actual number of vintage vehicles is relatively small. Yet proponents of the ban argue that these cars, due to their outdated technology, contribute significantly to carbon emissions and air pollution. Classic cars are often driven only a few thousand miles a year, which is a fraction of the distance that everyday commuter cars rack up. In fact, the environmental impact of vintage vehicles is negligible compared to the massive footprint left by much more common forms of transportation. The numbers tell a different story, so why are vintage cars being singled out? If the environmental case isn't as strong as it seems, what about the economic impact? Could this ban do more harm than good? A cultural crossroads. What's at stake? This isn't just about cars, it's about erasing a piece of history. The push to ban vintage cars isn't just an attack on the environment, it's an assault on American car culture and history. Classic cars aren't just machines, they're tangible links to our past, and for many they represent freedom, nostalgia, and a symbol of American ingenuity. From the post-war era's triumph of the muscle car to the elegant roadsters of the 1950s, classic cars tell the story of America's industrial boom, cultural evolution, and individual expression. For generations, these vehicles have been a significant part of American life. They've starred in movies, been passed down through families, and been lovingly restored by collectors who appreciate their history. Imagine driving down the street, your engine roaring as you cruise in a '67 Shelby Mustang or a Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. These cars aren't just vehicles, they're rolling pieces of history that connect people to a time when the open road symbolized freedom and possibility. Banning them would mean erasing these chapters of history, silencing the engines that carried generations forward. A ban on vintage cars is a ban on a cherished tradition. As we look deeper into the issue, we'll explore the broader implications this decision could have on the automotive world and what the future holds for classic cars. If you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to like the video, it helps us spread the word. Environmental justifications. Fact or fiction? Is banning classic cars really about saving the planet, or is there a bigger agenda at play? The heart of the debate over the proposed ban on vintage cars revolves around one primary justification: environmental concerns. According to the proponents of the ban, classic cars are major contributors to pollution, especially considering their outdated engine technology and lack of modern emissions controls. But is this really the whole story? While it's true that classic cars were not built with emission standards in mind, many critics argue that they are being unfairly demonized. Vintage cars account for a minuscule fraction of the total vehicles on the road today, often estimated at less than 1% of the total fleet in the United States. So can we really justify banning them based on their environmental impact, especially when other industries are far bigger offenders? Take private jets, for instance. While a vintage car might emit a few times the pollution of a modern vehicle, a private jet can emit up to 20 times as much carbon per passenger as a commercial flight. Then there are cruise ships. Their contribution to global pollution is staggering, with some ships emitting the equivalent of millions of cars in a single day. Industrial operations too are responsible for massive amounts of carbon emissions. So why the focus on vintage cars when these industries are allowed to operate with little regulation or scrutiny? Additionally, many classic cars are driven sporadically, often only a few thousand miles a year. Their overall emissions are minuscule when compared to the millions of miles driven by everyday commuter vehicles, many of which still run on gasoline. If the goal is to reduce emissions, why not focus on the high-polluting vehicles that are used daily instead of targeting the few classic cars that are more of a symbol of nostalgia than a significant threat to the environment? The numbers tell a different story, so why are vintage cars being singled out? If the environmental argument isn't as strong as it seems, what about the economic impact of this ban? Could it actually do more harm than good? Economic fallout, a billion-dollar industry at risk. Could banning vintage cars cripple an entire industry? The classic car community isn't just a group of enthusiasts, it's a massive economic engine. The collector car market generates billions of dollars annually in the United States. In 2020 alone, the industry generated between $14 to $15 billion in revenue. This revenue supports a vast network of businesses and jobs, from mechanics and restorers to auction houses and event organizers. The economic importance of the classic car industry is undeniable. Consider the annual Monterey Car Week, a key event for collectors and car lovers. This prestigious event brings in millions of dollars in tourism revenue to the region. Visitors flock to the area for events like the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, where rare cars are sold at auction for tens of millions of dollars. These events don't just provide entertainment, they inject significant amounts of money into the local economy, benefiting hotels, restaurants, and businesses. A ban on vintage cars would have a ripple effect on these communities. With classic car events potentially being canceled or severely restricted, small businesses that depend on the influx of visitors would suffer. Hotels, restaurants, and other tourism-dependent enterprises would face a significant drop in business, leading to potential closures and layoffs. This is especially concerning in regions like Monterey, where the classic car industry is a cornerstone of the local economy. This isn't just about cars, it's about jobs, livelihoods, and local economies. But what about the individual collectors? What happens when their investments are rendered worthless overnight? Individual collectors, passion or asset loss? For collectors, this isn't just a hobby, it's an investment. What happens if that's taken away? For many classic car enthusiasts, these vehicles aren't just pieces of metal and chrome, they are investments. The classic car market is full of individuals who have spent years, and in some cases decades, restoring, maintaining, and preserving their vehicles. These cars are passed down through families, traded at auction, and lovingly cared for by collectors who see them as part of their identity. But a sudden ban on these vehicles would create a devastating financial loss for many collectors. Classic cars, particularly rare models, can be worth hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. For some, these cars are their retirement funds or a key part of their financial portfolio. A ban would not only render their financial investment worthless, but would also strip them of a piece of their personal history. Imagine investing years of your life and large sums of money into restoring a 1965 Ford Mustang or a Chevrolet Corvette Stingray, only to have the government declare that your investment is no longer legal to drive or sell. The potential financial consequences for individual collectors could be catastrophic, with many losing not just their cars, but their life's work. This isn't just a financial issue, it's a personal one. For many collectors, these cars are more than just assets. They represent passion, nostalgia, and connection to the past. The thought of losing them is akin to losing a piece of their identity. For many, these cars represent more than money. They represent identity. While collectors are up in arms over the financial implications, let's look at how the entire automotive industry is reacting to this proposal. The bigger picture. What's next for the automotive industry? If vintage cars are banned, what does this mean for the future of the automotive industry? The proposal to ban vintage cars may seem like a niche issue affecting collectors, but it has far-reaching implications for the broader automotive industry. Classic cars play a significant role in maintaining brand loyalty and legacy for many automakers. Take Ford, for instance. Imagine a lifelong Mustang enthusiast who treasures their 1967 model. That person is far more likely to consider buying a modern Ford Mustang when the time comes for a new car purchase. Classic cars serve as ambassadors for brands, fostering long-term relationships between manufacturers and their customers. By removing classic cars from the equation, automakers could lose this important connection to their history and loyal customer base. General Motors, Ford, and other manufacturers all have deep ties to the classic car world. For many of these companies, their legacy is intertwined with the cars that built them, vehicles like the Chevy Camaro or the Ford F-150. A ban on vintage cars could potentially weaken brand equity, as newer models may fail to evoke the same passion and nostalgia for consumers. While modern cars may offer better performance and efficiency, they lack the emotional connection that classic cars provide. For the automotive industry, the consequences of this ban aren't just about classic cars, they are about maintaining the cultural relevance of the industry itself. This isn't just a protest, it's a rallying cry for freedom and heritage. As the car culture and industry react, let's look at how lawmakers are weighing in on this controversial proposal. If you're finding this analysis insightful, consider sharing it with fellow car enthusiasts and friends. The enthusiasts strike back. Grassroots movements. When you threaten a community's passion, you spark a movement, and this one is revving up fast. The classic car community is not a passive group. When their rights, freedom, and passion are threatened, they don't just sit idly by, they mobilize. From coast to coast, enthusiasts, restorers, and collectors are uniting to protest this proposed ban. Online forums, car clubs, and social media platforms are buzzing with activity as people from all walks of life join forces to rally behind their cause. One of the most powerful advocacy groups in this battle is Specialty Equipment Market Association, an organization that has long fought for the rights of car enthusiasts. SEMA has been quick to raise awareness about the economic and cultural significance of classic cars, urging lawmakers to reconsider this drastic proposal. Their message is clear: classic cars are not the problem, and banning them will have negligible environmental benefits. But it's not just big organizations fighting for the cause. Grassroots efforts are gaining traction as well. Car rallies, parades, and peaceful protests are being organized not just to celebrate classic cars, but also as statements of opposition against the ban. These events are drawing crowds both online and in person, showcasing the cultural and economic importance of vintage vehicles. The movement is growing rapidly, with individuals sharing their stories, signing petitions, and organizing marches. This united front shows that the fight to preserve vintage cars isn't just personal, it's professional, and it's about protecting jobs, businesses, and entire industries. As the industry joins the fray, lawmakers are stepping into the spotlight, and the battle lines are becoming more intense. Let's dive into the political pushback against this proposal. Political pushback, a growing divide. What happens when lawmakers join the fray? The debate goes from heated to explosive. As soon as the proposed ban on classic cars hit the headlines, the political backlash was swift and intense. The debate quickly escalated into a heated political battleground, with lawmakers from both sides of the aisle voicing strong opposition to the measure. In California, where the push for zero-emission policies is particularly strong, Republican lawmakers have been particularly vocal. Representative Doug LaMalfa of Northern California has called the proposal a radical green agenda that threatens the livelihoods of countless Americans. LaMalfa and others argue that the ban would disproportionately affect middle-class families and undermine the freedom and individuality that have long been associated with classic car ownership. At the same time, some progressive lawmakers have also expressed concerns about the economic ramifications of banning classic cars. These lawmakers argue that the classic car market isn't the primary culprit when it comes to emissions, and that targeting these vehicles is an ineffective strategy for combating climate change. Instead, they advocate for policies that incentivize the use of clean energy without alienating car enthusiasts and small businesses. This bipartisan pushback reflects the diverse perspectives on how best to tackle climate change. While some see aggressive measures as essential for the country's future, others view these proposals as overreach, prioritizing symbolism over tangible change. As this debate unfolds, the political divide over the future of classic cars may ultimately shape the future of policymaking in the US. This isn't just about cars anymore, it's about the future of policymaking itself. The public opinion is shifting rapidly. Let's take a closer look at how the media is responding and how public sentiment is shaping this debate. Media and public reaction. Whose side are they on? In the court of public opinion, the debate over vintage cars is proving to be anything but straightforward. When a topic as controversial as banning classic cars hits the public stage, the media plays a pivotal role in shaping the narrative. The coverage of this issue has been polarizing, with media outlets on both the right and left presenting contradictory viewpoints. Conservative media outlets have seized on the proposal as an example of overreaching government control. They argue that the government is interfering in personal freedoms and targeting a group of Americans who are simply following their passion for cars. To them, the ban represents an unnecessary attack on individual rights, particularly in a country where freedom and self-expression are core values. On the other hand, progressive media outlets have presented more mixed views. While some support the environmental goals of the proposal, others question the effectiveness and fairness of targeting classic cars. Critics point out the irony that classic cars are being blamed for pollution, while other, far larger sources of emissions remain largely unregulated. Public opinion has also leaned heavily in favor of preserving classic cars. Polls conducted in states with a deep connection to car culture, such as Michigan, Texas, and California, show that a majority of respondents oppose the ban. They cite not only the economic benefits, but also the cultural and personal value that vintage vehicles hold. As this debate heats up, it's clear that public support for preserving classic cars is growing. Car enthusiasts, collectors, and politicians are rallying behind the cause, amplifying their message and increasing the pressure on lawmakers to rethink this drastic proposal. The message is loud and clear. Americans won't give up their classics without a fight. Now that we've seen the public reaction, let's dive into the automotive industry's response and how this proposal is sending shockwaves through the sector. If you're enjoying this analysis, be sure to comment below and share your thoughts on the proposal. Should vintage cars be saved, or is it time for them to go? Innovation to the rescue, adapting to the future. Could technology offer a lifeline for vintage cars in a world moving towards zero emissions? Amid the growing debate over the potential ban on classic cars, there is a glimmer of hope for enthusiasts who refuse to see their beloved vehicles fade into history. While the push for zero-emission vehicles intensifies, some innovators are looking for a middle ground, a way to preserve the legacy of classic cars without compromising the environment. One promising solution is electric vehicle conversions for classic cars. Companies like Zelectric and EV West have begun offering conversions that replace the old combustion engines of vintage vehicles with modern electric powertrains. These retrofits allow owners to keep their classic car's iconic design while dramatically reducing emissions and improving performance. Not only do these conversions help owners meet emission standards, but they also revitalize older cars, making them more reliable and accessible for modern driving conditions. While the process is not cheap, conversion costs can run anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. It provides a potential solution for preserving the cultural significance of vintage cars. In fact, some see it as a revolutionary opportunity to embrace cleaner technology while maintaining the aesthetic and emotional value of the past. For those who worry that the future of car culture is being erased, these innovations offer hope that sustainability and nostalgia can coexist. If the industry can rally around these technologies, it may be possible to keep the spirit of classic cars alive in a way that aligns with modern environmental goals. Saving classic cars isn't just about the past, it's about protecting our future identity and preserving the spirit of freedom that defines us. As the debate continues to unfold, it's clear that the stakes are higher than ever. Let's talk about the political battle and what it could mean for the future of classic cars. The political battle. Will legislators take action? When the government puts a target on classic cars, who really wins? The proposal to ban vintage cars is not just a matter of policy, it has become a political battleground. While the push for zero-emission policies has been strong in states like California, the backlash from classic car enthusiasts and industry leaders is gaining momentum. This is no longer just an issue of emissions, it's an issue of personal freedom, property rights, and the preservation of cultural heritage. California has been at the forefront of pushing for zero-emission zones in urban areas, a policy that would effectively restrict the use of gas-powered cars in certain regions. The California Air Resources Board has been instrumental in shaping these policies, and the federal government has followed suit, considering a national ban on vintage cars as part of its broader environmental strategy. However, this aggressive move has alienated a large portion of the public, particularly in states with strong car cultures like Michigan and Texas. Republican lawmakers have voiced strong opposition to the proposal, framing it as an attack on personal freedoms and private property. Representative Doug LaMalfa has called the plan a radical green agenda that threatens the livelihoods of Americans who have invested in these vehicles. He has pointed out the hypocrisy of lawmakers who support the ban but still use classic cars for public events like parades, further fueling the public outcry. On the other hand, some progressive lawmakers are questioning the effectiveness of such an approach. They argue that the ban on classic cars is a symbolic gesture that won't do much to reduce emissions. Instead, they believe that incentive-based policies would be more effective in promoting sustainable practices without attacking small communities and hobbies. The political landscape is divided, with each side presenting valid concerns. This conflict has become a test case for how the US will approach climate change and whether environmental policies will prioritize symbolism or real-world solutions. This political battle could shape the future of policymaking and impact the direction of the entire car culture in America. The battle is now in the hands of lawmakers, but it's also about public support. Let's look at the broader implications for the future of car culture and the automotive industry. If you care about preserving classic cars and the heritage they represent, now's the time to speak up. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.